Okay, so in this video, you can probably tell we're going to be talking about radios. What a surprise. My channel is predominantly about radios, isn't it? Well, in particular today, we're going to be talking about the Baofeng radios and the different models. I've been an amateur radioist now for probably about 8 or 9 years. And I first qualified, first radios I went out and bought were the Yaesus. So I've had the 7800s, the 7900s, I've had the 897s and the 857s. Also a variety of handhelds from Yaesu as well, but they're all very, very expensive, and you know what, you take them out and about in all weathers and they're not always sort of all that waterproof, and you get a bit concerned about using them, especially if you go camping and take them sort of rough terrain. You kind of get worried about dropping them, so you have to be very, very careful with them. But then I became introduced to the cheaper side of radio, and that was mainly thanks to the internet and thanks to eBay. So one of the first radios that I then purchased from the cheaper bracket was the Wuxun, or Wushan, as I think some people pronounce them as. This is the KG-UVD-1P, dual band, and it's a 5-watt radio, 4-5-watt radio, and it's not too bad, to be fair. It does the job, or it did. It doesn't anymore. The battery's completely died on it. One of the things I liked about it was fairly a sturdy radio to use. It was nicely evenly weighted. The buttons were quite good to use. They weren't too mushy. Nice click, nice feel to them. One of the downsides to it was an absolute swine to program. Back in those days, you didn't have so much software available, not like you do today. So a bit of a complication to program manually for repeaters. But if you want to use simplex, it was absolutely spot on. So that wasn't a too bad radio for that, really. So moving then onwards to something a little bit more user-friendly was the Baofeng. So if I remember rightly, one of the first ones was the UV5. This one's got the extended lithium-ion battery on this. Normally they are all that kind of size. It's just the different battery that I'm using on this at the moment. Standard stock antenna, really not very efficient. Upgradable to these Nagoya antennas, the NA771s. These are dual band, just screw in their place and take over. They make the reception quite a lot clearer. I'm not sure what the decibel gain increase is on those. I know it's only probably about 2 or 3, I think. For what I remember, but it certainly makes a difference. But if you want UHF, then a small stock antenna like this, it kind of does the job for you. So round about this sort of era, this is when they then started introducing the software and the programming leads, which are all kind of compatible with each other. The Baofeng software wasn't the easiest to use. It had its problems. There were faults with it, but then Chirp came in, and then Chirp allowed the programming of the Baofeng radios, and that was a great advantage, that was, because Chirp's a fantastic bit of software. It's free to use. You can go out there and install it, get it downloaded, and you can program a different range of radios, both portable and sort of mobile handheld radio types. So one of the bigger features with this was the fact that you've got the 3 buttons on the top. You've got the VFO and memory mode. You've got the A and B for your dual VFOs. And you've got a band button there, so you can change the bands. Programming wise, turning the squelch on and off, changing the steps and everything else like that, pretty much the same. The firmware has changed over the years, but generally not an awful lot has changed with them. The quality for the audio, for transmitting and for receiving, I've not noticed any difference myself. So then things progress, and they start introducing newer radios, and then we get to, I think it was the second version, or the second generation of the radios that came out, which were similar to these. Now this is the 5R2. One of the bigger differences, there's no band button on there, okay? But the menu system is pretty much the same. The firmware is different. A few changes they have made. They've changed the stock antenna. It is actually slightly larger. And it does seem to be an improved antenna. It looks a lot better. I don't think it's quite as fragile, and it's certainly better to have in a bag if you wanted to be able to put it into an enclosed space. It seems to be a lot more flexible. The 5R2 to me seems a much cheaper radio, and I don't like it as much. If I compare this to, say, this one, this is the UV5R Plus. This one feels a lot better when you're pressing keys in. It seems to be a bit more comfortable in the hand as well for some reason, although this one has got a more modern sort of rounder screen. But one of the things I dislike about this radio in particular is the fact that the buttons are very, very soft and quite squishy, and you don't really feel that you're pressing anything in until you can really sort of push it in there. And they're very, very wobbly. I don't think it'd be very long really until that sort of wears off. So that's one of the disadvantages of that one. So through time, the radios then started getting more and more popular. One of the greater audiences for these radios are preppers and survivalists, people who want to be able to pack for the apocalypse basically, and you know, be sort of prepared for whatever. They're a great radio because you've got the ability, which you shouldn't do, I think it is illegal, but you do have the ability to be able to use these on PMR frequencies. Our PMR frequencies work on the 446 range. There are now a new load of PMR frequencies that come out, also covering VHF. But I know in the States you have the FRS and the GMRS. Is it GMRS frequencies over there? That's their kind of like equivalent, I think, to our PMR. Over here, certainly for PMR, it is illegal, but it will still do it, and a lot of people do. And I think for people who do paintballing and the you know, all the various sort of sports, they like these radios for that. And who can blame them really, because they're very small and they're very compact, and you know, they are quite sturdy radios. And you have the power behind them as well. So if you are going to be talking on PMR, which you shouldn't do, you know, you're going to get some very good range from them. Mainly line of sight, obviously, because it's of the way the bands and the frequencies work. But certainly they are good for sort of short distance communications. One of the great advantages is the compatibility with all of these radios, because all of these radios you can plug in an external fist mic. Now the connectors that we have on these, as you can see, is just the 2-pin prong radio plugs. Okay, these radios are all pretty much standard, and it's the same connections as Kenwood radios use. So this is what they were based on. So these microphones here will work with all the Wuxen radios, all the older Baofeng radios, and it just saves you a lot of money if you've got quite a selection to use. The other thing is the desktop chargers. These chargers are great. The radio just sits inside them and will charge away. It used to come with a power adapter that would plug into the mains. Now it would come with a foreign plug that would need adapting over here in the UK. And that caused a few problems as well. But then, not so long back, they then introduced a USB kind of lead, which enables you then to plug that into your charger. And instead of plugging a mains adapter in, you've just got a USB that will then plug into your mains. And even though USB is only 5.2 volts, it would still charge. And it does charge as well. Any of these radios will then plug in. So then moving on to the newer generation. So then you want something a bit tougher, something a bit more durable, something that you can perhaps take out in all weathers, because don't forget, these can't really do that. So then my latest purchase is the Baofeng GT3WP. It's the same kind of menu system that you have. The firmware is obviously newer, but the programming of the functions, the features is exactly the same as the UV5s. It's a much tougher antenna. It's a much tougher radio. It's got the same kind of antenna, the same features, different battery, different connector. You can't use these same accessories, but that's not really a problem. They've all got their own chargers anyway. It doesn't matter that you can't change those. The only gripe that I have is the programming of this, because you see this has got a different plug on, and I'll show you which one it is. This one, this is kind of more based on the Motorola type. You see that there? That's what clips onto the side of the radio. So this is the earpiece, and then you have the microphone there, and that will just screw to the side of the radio. And that's all good and very well, But when you're like me, who has quite a variety of radios, it's nice to be able to interchange them. You can't do that anymore. That's the one downside. The programming lead as well, I have the same standard programming lead for all of these. Now I just have to use a different lead and screw it onto there. Again, it's not the end of the world. It's just a bit of a shame as to why they had to do that. But this is a good radio. This could be dropped in water. It's IP. Let me have a look at the instructions. It's actually an IP67 rating, which I believe it means is waterproof. It can be submersed up to probably about a metre for so many minutes. I think that's what the rating is. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't want to risk it. But it's nice to know that I can take it outside in the rain, and if it gets wet, it's not a problem. It's not the end of the world. So these are the radios that I generally use. I have one in my day bag that I take to work with me every day, purely because it's nice to be able to just log into a couple of local repeaters should I feel the need to. And it doesn't take any space up. They're so small. It's not doesn't really weigh anything or cause me any problems. I keep some in my car as well, some in my partner's car, some in the house, some in my workshop, some in the house itself. It's quite an obsession, I think, really. But generally, they are good radios. So there we go. So the price of these radios do vary. You pay anywhere between £19 up to sort of £39. Missed one off, the 888, Baofeng 888 BF. This is a grey radio. No LCD screen on this one. It's nice and simple. It's a 16-channel UHF, 5-watt output, programmable exactly the same way as these, via the same lead, straight into your computer. You can even use chirp on these, programming it to the frequencies that you want. Nice and simple, very, very easy to use. Whether they would work after you drop them a couple of times, don't think so. Whether it would work in the rain, it probably wouldn't. But cheap and cheerful, you can get these now for less than £10 each. So it's hardly the end of the world if they do get broken. Okay, so that's pretty much it then. Just wanted to give you a quick oversight. I had planned a bit of a lesson on them, a bit of a speech. I've written some stuff down, some text stuff on. But the only problem is that if you go into one site, it'll tell you one thing, go into another, it'll tell you another thing altogether. The one thing I can tell you is, if you want to check the firmware, all you need to do is to press button number 3 whilst you power it up. And as it comes on, it tells you. So this is BFB 297 software on this one for the firmware. I've got about 3 or 4 different types of firmware on here. But looking past the firmware, ultimately, they work the same. The quality, I found, seems to be the same. And if I was to talk to someone with one of the first generation compared to the 3rd or 4th generation, probably wouldn't really notice any difference at all. So it's one of those things. So anyway, thank you for watching. I hope this has been of some interest to you. And I'll catch you next time.